channel. If you're joining us here live, uh, leave a comment in the chat box and say hi. Let us know you're here joining us. For anyone new, I'm Vanessa. I'm a YA fantasy, paranormal, and horror writer and book publisher. And on this channel, I talk about books, writing, and all things related to storytelling. And today's live stream is part of my monthly Writing Diversity series. This is a series I created to help writers learn how to write diverse characters. So in today's live stream, I'm going to be chatting with Angela Locashio. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did. Like pistachio.
Locashio, cool. And today we're going to be talking about intersectional identities, particularly being neurodivergent, autistic, and queer. So, Angela, do you want to say hi and give us a brief introduction to yourself?
Hello. I am Angela Locashio, rhymes with pistachio. In fact, they call me Mama Pistachio. And yes, I am neurodivergent and I am queer and I am an advocate for neurodivergent folks, the LGBTQ plus community, and military families as well. Those are 3 of my many, many intersections that I am passionate about. So thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, thanks for being here today. So, before we get started, quick disclaimer. You guys know I always start with this at the beginning of each interview. But I want to remind you guys that, the group is a monolith. So Angela is here graciously sharing with us her experience as someone who is neurodivergent and queer. And hopefully this will help other writers out there as well. But keep in mind, her experiences do not represent everyone who is neurodivergent, autistic, or queer. So always make sure you do your research and make sure you get sensitivity readers for your stories. So with that being said, let's dive into the questions. The first question I have on here is you identify as neurodivergent, autistic, and queer. Those things look different for everyone. So, can you share with us what each of those terms mean for you and what that looks like for your life?
Absolutely. And number one, thank you for providing the questions beforehand. That makes a huge difference for so many of us. It helps us prepare. It helps us feel comfortable and safe coming in. And it helps us kind of stay on topic for those of us who might wander. Or we get really excited about something and we just want to talk about that. So again, thank you so much for doing that. So I may not be looking at the camera because I've written down something that I don't want to forget. Please, for anybody, just know that that's not because I don't care about you that I'm looking away. I absolutely do care, and that is a sign of me caring, me looking away and making sure that I am sharing what I think is important. So let's look at neurodiversity and neurodivergent. These are 2 terms that a lot of people don't quite understand what the difference is. So neurodiversity is just the fact that we all have minds and they all think differently. Or you gave a disclaimer, right? You meet one person and you meet one person, and that's one person's experience, and we're not speaking for the whole group. And so neurodiversity really just is that human minds are diverse, period. Neurodivergent being a person and their mind may be neurodivergent, and they have neurodivergencies that provide, some people say superpowers and some people say challenges, and I say both. Everything has both sides of the coin. So neurodivergence, some of those are, and this is not all encompassing on this list, some of those are autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, Tourette's, dyspraxia. And then there's also bipolar disorder, personality disorders, and all of these things that have been super medicalized that are all kind of put in there. And it really depends on who you're talking to as to whether they think that that's a neurodivergence or a disorder. Maybe it's both. That conversation is still happening. So there's this paradigm that is happening. It's called the neurodiversity paradigm. And that is where we start looking at our brains and how our brains are thinking and processing the world and thinking, feeling, and doing the things that they do. And social dynamics plays into that, right? The social construct, the social scripts. So everything that we're doing and the way that we think that we need to act and that we think there is a typical brain, and we have neurotypicals versus neurodivergent people. That's because society says this is what's normal and this is what's weird. And that's the neurodiversity paradigm saying, but actually it's just a social construct, right? It's just a social construct, and there really isn't one special way that it's supposed to be. We are all diverse, and that's just how it is. And then we go into the neurodiversity movement, where we take that paradigm and we say, hey, we have rights to all of these things. And because our brain doesn't work in the typical way with this typical script that society says it should, doesn't mean that we don't have the same rights and we shouldn't have the same access to all of the things that everybody has. So that's the neurodiversity piece. And all of that is important and what it means to me to be a neurodivergent person. And then there's the queer piece, right? The queer piece that my gender experience and my sexuality does not have a specific label. I am a woman and I use the pronouns she, her, even though I don't really care. And I'm a woman because that's part of my experience, but I'm a genderqueer woman because my gender is fluid and flexible and depends on, I don't know, how I'm feeling that day, the context. It doesn't fit the stereotypical, this is what it means and looks like to be a woman today in our society. And because of that, I identify as a genderqueer woman. And yes, you can be both. And then as far as sexuality, I'm not gay, I'm not a lesbian, I'm not bisexual, I'm not pansexual, I'm fluid, and it's context dependent. So I am using the umbrella term queer.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for breaking that down and explaining the difference and nuance between them.
Awesome. And that's my experience. And the next person's is going to be different, and they might have something different to say about it.
Yeah. So while we're on talking about neurodivergence and autism, you discovered your autism after the age of 40. So what was that like, and how did you figure out you were autistic?
I was first diagnosed with ADHD when I was 22. And I went to therapy and I did all of the things that I was supposed to do and took medication and lots of behavioral therapy. And how are you going to learn how to do the things that you're supposed to do in this world and do it the right way and fit into whatever box. And so I carried that label with me, but there was something about it that I just kept thinking, this isn't all. There's more. There's more to this piece. First of all, I'm lucky that 23 years ago, I was able to get and have access to a doctor who diagnosed me as a female with ADHD. That's not been a lot of people's experience. And I recognize that because I worked in medical, because it was something that I really, really cared about. And I had family members, male family members, and I was studying it and studying it and studying it. That privileged me to be able to have the conversation and advocate for myself to get a diagnosis in the first place. And that interest carried on, trying to understand how my brain worked, how that affected my relationships, how it affected me as a sexual being, how it affected me as a friend, how it affected me as an employee. Why, when I had, a 4.0 GPA, did I choose not to go to college and instead went right out to work? Why did I have all of these needs to have touch in a certain way? And back then I wasn't quite aware of the whole sensory thing. But I created this sensory environment around me that worked for me, that supported me, that helped me. And I did that as a teacher in my classroom. And so I wanted to be at school all the time. And I worked and I worked and I worked a lot. But I really enjoyed being in that space where there were no overhead lights, and I had a trampoline, and I had different textures around me, and I had specific kinds of snacks, and I had balls to bounce on, and I had swivel chairs. What a wonderful space. And it worked for me, and it helped me for a long time. And people would come into my room and they would say, "Oh, it's so peaceful in here." Even when I had students who had the worst behavior, they could come in my room and be calm, if you will, or at least they could do the things that they wanted to do and feel like they were contributing and being able to stay in school. And I was too. Right? It kept me there. So I had all of that. And then I'm watching teachers coming in, and they're coming and they're talking to me about stress, and they're talking to me about feeling burnt out. And that's just feeding this intense interest that I have in understanding humans and our relationships and our communication with one another, and trying to understand things that I didn't naturally understand because it wasn't my experience, but trying to understand why that person is that way, why they're having the reaction that they are, and then watching what helped and what didn't help, and keep doing that. I keep being a teacher, and I got the opportunity 3 years ago to stop teaching and to do what I said I was going to do when I was 15. I said I was going to be a sex therapist.
Oh.
Right? When I was 15, that's what I was going to do. I was going to be a sex therapist, and that's where I started studying, the psychology of humans and all of that stuff. And I didn't do it because it was not the ladylike, appropriate thing to do. Right? Mm-hmm. So first I went into nursing, and then I went into teaching because that's what girls are supposed to do. Anyway, and I had this opportunity to really sit down and focus and look at sensory aspects and sensory integration. And I became a certified clinical sexologist. And I'm working with people. And as an advocate of the LGBTQ community, I'm working with a lot of trans folks. And I'm noticing some overlaps between neurodiversity and thoughts about gender. And sensory processing and stress. And I'm putting all of these together. And at the same time, I had moved to this space where, if you look at these walls, they are not the kind of walls that I would have in my house. White, beige, these colors are not my kinds of colors. I like bright, vibrant, dark colors. And that makes me feel safe. This makes me feel uncomfortable, but it's base housing, and we don't change it. And the environment was different, and the sounds. And there's a lot of noise, and it's very loud here. And the smells of my neighbors who had, candles burning, and I can smell their candles, and they can burn toast, and I can smell the toast. And somebody can smoke a cigarette across the street, and it'll come in my window, and I can smell it. And I can hear the dogs barking and all of this stuff, and it's just getting to me. So I decided I need to get a therapist here. So I did. At almost 45 years old, I hadn't been to therapy in several years, and I get a therapist and I start talking like, I need help with my ADHD. I need serious help with my ADHD. I'm not taking any medication. I'll do medication. I'll do whatever. And immediately she's like, okay, we need to talk about sensory processing and we need to talk about autistic traits. And then that got the ball rolling. And that's how we discovered that. And I'm so glad that we did.
Wow. That's interesting. So you went to her as saying you needed help with the ADHD. Was there something that she picked up on? Well, obviously there's the sensory overload, right? But was there anything else she picked up on that made her go, let's talk about autism?
Yes. So there is, I like and thrive in routine. Now, I believed that that was because it was the only way, and maybe it still is, the only way for me to function with ADHD. Right? In order to get things done, I have to have a certain routine. And if my routine gets interrupted, for example, we go out to dinner. I order the same thing every single time. We go to this restaurant, I order the same thing. If they don't have it, rather than just ordering something else, number one, that can take me to tears. It can take me from being happy and perfect and the world is great to immediately I'm in panic mode and I'm in tears. Now I have to make a decision. And what really it is I have to make a decision when here's what I'm used to, here's what I want, and here's what I feel safe with. And I don't know if I'm going to be safe with something else. I don't know if I'm going to like that. I don't know if the textures are going to be off. And I will leave and go somewhere else before I will order something else off of that menu. I'll go somewhere else where I know that it's safe. And by safe, I don't mean like somebody's going to come and hurt me there. I just mean I know it. I'm comfortable with it, right? So there's that. There's the, processes and procedures that I go through. It's not like an OCD kind of thing for me. It's not like, oh, something bad is going to happen if I don't do this. It's if I don't do this in this order, it's probably not going to get done.
Yeah.
Or it's not going to get done the way that I need it to be done to be able to do whatever the next part of that process is. So it was talking about that kind of thing. It was talking about the intense anxiety that I would have to go to the grocery store. And, that seems like such an easy thing. It seems like such an easy thing to do. But the grocery store has a lot of sounds and a lot of smells and a lot of unpredictability in the people who are going to be there. There's 5 different carts going around and their wheels are going like this, and you pick something up and it touches you and it doesn't feel right, or heaven forbid they don't have what you want.
Yeah.
You have your list. These are the things that you get and they don't have it. Breakdown. So just little things like that we talked about. And then all of them built up. My lack of desire to do the things that are necessary to make new friends. I have the friends that I have. I'm happy with the friends that I have. We know each other. We do our things. They're far away. I am online, and I don't try necessarily to make new connections in this new place. Just those kinds of things.
Okay. So now that you know this about yourself now that you know about um, your neurodivergent brain. Is there anything looking back on your life that you think, now this makes a lot of sense? Like, no wonder I'm like this, now that you have your diagnosis, it kind of explains things that maybe you thought were just a quirky trait before.
I mean, it explains a lot, right? Like it explains it explains why I loved my classroom so much and would prefer to stay there. One of those things is I attributed that to my relationship and that I wasn't happy with the relationship. And there were things that I wasn't happy with, but looking back, I can say, wow, if I had known this, would I have looked at that relationship differently? Would I have been able to express? So, my partner now, I am able to express to him, I need you to grab a hold of my arm and I need you to squeeze it as tight as you can when we're out and about and I get overwhelmed with something. That seems so simple. That seems so simple now to be able to communicate that. And what if, right? So there's always that. um I'm not sure if you're familiar with the ACEs survey, but it's the Adverse Childhood Experience Survey. There's a component to that survey that is also a resilience survey. So for anybody watching, these surveys are for looking at childhood experiences that you have that, when added up, equals CPTSD, complex PTSD, and has a great impact on your health. The higher you go up in the numbers, the shorter lifespan you are expected to have, the more likelihood you are that you're going to have, be smoking or alcoholism or relationship problems, these things that lead to unhealthy lives. But they have a resilience survey as well. And that resilience survey is, are there people there that are supporting you? Do you have somebody who you feel safe with, who you can go to when your parents are going through a divorce? Do you feel safe in school? Do you have money to buy food? I mean, there are different things that go on this resilience scale. And I have to wonder, I don't know how much the fact that I was not diagnosed at a young age um, led to me being resilient because I had to engage in the resources that were around me to survive. Or, holy moly, what if I had been diagnosed and I had all of those things in place? Because I didn't necessarily have a lot of resilience pieces, but if we would have known, would we have been able to put those pieces in? And then where could I be today? Would I have gone to college right out of high school? Would I have been Dr. Angela Locashio today? I don't know.
Yeah. Something we will never know, I think.
Right, right. We will never know.
Yeah. Um, so, in talking about your experience and your autism and everything, and the ADHD and stuff, can you share any ways that I know many neurodivergent people will sometimes mask their symptoms to appear more uh, neurotypical, if I'm going to say. um, yeah, to appear more neurotypical. So, can you share ways that you've masked your symptoms?
Absolutely. One way is I have watched and studied, and I am very good at making my face do the appropriate things. I know when I'm supposed to smile, for the most part. Um, when I am not with a very, very, very few people, I am smiling. I am boisterous. I am excited. I am, if people ask, how are you? I'm like, I am fantastic. I can't imagine being any other way. I literally have said that over and over and over and over again. And people have called me peppy and bubbly. And actually, that's what a lot of people see. The people watching here are probably like, she's so high energy and she's, she's bubbly and she's happy. And so I like to role play. And I'm a huge fan of Amber, which is a diceless role playing game. And it's all about storytelling and creating your own story, right? And then I'm also, and most people will be more familiar with this, a fan of D&D, which is a diced role playing game. But you create this character, you write them down on paper. They have things that they say, things that they're known for. Like, for example, when I'm playing, I can say eyebrow raise, and everybody can know what my character is thinking and feeling at that moment. I do the same thing in real life. I put on a character. My husband and I have to go to the Marine Corps ball in November, and it has a special dress code. It is formal attire required. So I could be like, no, not going. Go by yourself. And then I can feel bad about that, right? Or I can say, I'm going to go with you. We're going to do this together. We're going to get through this together. I know, he also has his own sensory stuff where he doesn't particularly like that, like collar that is really thick, and stuck around the neck. So like, let's get through this together. I literally put myself in character. We've talked about it and said, okay, I'm going to go as this character and I'm going to be acting like that. That is who I am. And that's how I get through it. And that's part of me. That character is part of who I am. It came out of my brain.
Mm-hmm.
But it also is part of a story that is created. So it's not an inauthentic character because it's me, but it's only a part of me.
Yeah.
And it may not be reflective of how much I'm enjoying that experience, no matter what. No matter, Angela is not going to enjoy that experience. However, the character is going to enjoy the experience, and she's going to go on a mission, and she's going to have things that have to be done, and a goal in mind. And so that's how I math. And that sounds maybe weird to some people, but for me, that's how I do it. It makes sense. It's scripted, it's thought out, it's planned, and this is how you behave. It's how I got through my life up until this point. You go into a meeting, you go into a job interview, you go and you do this, whatever, you put on this facade. The problem is the energy that it takes to maintain that over a long period of time.
Yeah.
That's where the problem comes in. And that's where the problem of masking comes in, and where we have to ask ourselves, what is right? Do I want to wake up in the morning and put this mask on and play this character? And am I able to do that all day long? Is this relationship that I'm going to have with this person, with this job, with this client, with this romantic partner, whatever, am I going to be able to maintain that? And if not, how am I going to go in it from the beginning so that I am presenting myself in a way that I don't have to take off a mask and explain that to them.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be a lot thinking about all that. You said, I was like, that's like as if, if you were an actor or actress and uh, having to perform all the time, no breaks, no days off, no breaks, no vacations. Um, kind of sounds like that, is what I was thinking.
Right. You have to be aware of and conscious of it in order to be able to schedule the breaks that you need, in order to be able to schedule those, schedule the time off. Except you have to do that every day in your real life. And honestly, everybody has to do that. All humans have to do that. We all need to be self aware to be able to know what our limits are and our boundaries and be able to advocate for ourselves and all of that. But being autistic means that if you're like me, so I can walk down the street and I can pass as a neurotypical cisgender heterosexual white woman with all of the privilege in the world. I can do that, and I am lucky. That I am so very lucky that I can do that. Should I have to?
Yeah, that's a great point. Um, so with all of this, are there any? Yes, are there any therapy treatments or medications that you use to help with the autism or the ADHD or any of that?
Before I answer that, let me just say, first of all, speaking of privilege, the privilege of being able to go and get tested, it's thousands of dollars. It's thousands of dollars for testing that is old, outdated,
Hmm.
and full of bias. It is testing that one doctor will say you're autistic and another doctor will say that you are not. I had a psychologist look me right in the eye and say, you are too successful and you are too able to have a conversation to possibly be autistic.
Hmm.
And I said, well, tell that to all the other autistic women out there. Because the experience is not that of a little white boy.
Hmm.
But the tests were written, the tests that are given today to adults and to females and to non-binary and transgender and other gender non-conforming folks and to Black folks and to Chinese folks, they were written for little white boys.
Yeah.
And that is one of many, many intersections. And it's created bias and difficulty for people to get diagnosed. So I do want to acknowledge that. And so if somebody says, I'm autistic, they're autistic. They don't have to have the money to go and pay the thousands of dollars. Just, there are accommodations, and everybody should have access to accommodations regardless of what their labels are, period. Yeah. If it helps them be productive, because we all want to be productive. We all want to contribute. There's not a single person who doesn't want to contribute. So that freaking piece of paper. Okay, step down off my soapbox a little bit. I'm going to look at the screen. Okay, you asked about medications and therapies. As I mentioned before, after being diagnosed with ADHD, I did a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy and a lot of dialectical behavioral therapy. And there are practices within that are great. You know, self-awareness and mindfulness. It's powerful stuff. Didn't do anything about the sensory stuff. Going to occupational therapy would have been great 25 years ago, and learning all of that. Medications, I find that if I am taking care of my sensory needs, medication is not necessary for me. I have taken every medication under the sun, and I have had many, many, many adverse reactions to said medications. Because if you are not depressed and you are given antidepressants, that can cause problems. And for years, let's talk about the intersection of being a person who has a vagina. That means that you have PMS, and it means that you are emotional. And therefore, if you have a problem, that's the first thing that needs to be addressed. Stress, sure, that's an important thing. We need to be talking about that. Unfortunately, it is disrespected, disregarded, and not taken seriously. There's this over medicalization kind of thing that's happening. And there's a problem with our healthcare system of not enough time, not enough resources, not enough money, whatever. Take these drugs. So I can take medication that numbs me out, and I can take medication that has an effect on my nerves, like my physical nerves. I had cancer surgery, and there was some nerve damage and stuff that happened and caused pain. The medication that I took for that affected all of my nervous system, right? So it kind of numbed me out. But I don't want to walk through my world numbed out and unable to experience the high levels of joy that I can't possibly experience when I'm taking a medication that numbs my nervous system. Great, it numbs the lows, but guess what? I want to feel the lows too. I want to feel. I don't want to take something that doesn't make me feel. And because for me, it is safe to not take medication if I am aware and I have the resources in place, a supportive partner, a place where I can create my own sensory environment, those sorts of things in place where I can be good. I'm good. I'm great. I'm happy. I'm able to say, oh, today's a hard day. I'm struggling. Here are some things, got them on a list, that I can do to support me in that. And that's what works best for me right now.
Okay. I'm glad you are able to find something that works for you. So I know medication doesn't work for everyone, so.
Right.
Yeah. So one question that I have is, I know within the disability community and also somewhat in the neurodivergent community, there'll be some people may prefer person first language versus identity first language. So I have autism versus I am autistic. So I wanted to ask, which one do you prefer, and can you share why?
I don't have a preference. I understand the implication of one versus the other. However, I could cause myself harm by getting into a rigidity of the word that I want used.
Mm-hmm.
I choose not to do that. I don't care about my pronouns. You can call me they, you can call me he, you can call me she, you can call me z, them, zer. I don't care. But that's me. Right? And so it's the same for I have autism, I'm autistic. I just don't care one way or the other. What I do care about is if I'm speaking with somebody and I make a mistake because they prefer something and they bring that to my attention, that I do not dismiss them.
Mm-hmm.
That I am respectful of that. And when I'm talking to that person, I use the appropriate terminology. If they say, you did it again, I told you, I say, sorry about that. I correct myself and I move on. Rather than taking it personally, putting it on myself and getting really defensive, which I see happen way too often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's one reason why I usually ask this question, because everyone's going to have their preference. And like I said at the beginning, no group is a monolith. So I think it's super important to always be respectful of people's choices and what they prefer, what terminology they want you to use.
Right. Right. Our identity is important to us, and we can do so much harm by being dismissive of another person's identity. As an ESOL teacher, I had so many names that were not white, Midwestern, Kansas, born and bred names that I had grown up with. Now, mind you, I had moved to Montreal and I had did that on purpose because I wanted to experience culture and I wanted to go to a school where I could actually learn. Please don't take this wrong. If you're somebody who went to school in the United States, I'm sure that you're an amazing ESL teacher. This was my choice. I wanted to go there where there was a different way of thinking about education for learners with other language backgrounds and other cultural backgrounds. And so it was so important to me to pronounce people's names correctly. And I messed them up all the time. But I didn't say, I'm never going to get that right. I said, can you pronounce that for me one more time? Can you write it down for me? You know, I learned because for some people, their name is very much part of their identity and we cannot dismiss it. So I think that helped me as far as looking at understanding intersectionality and understanding how important our identity is to each and every one of us, and how much harm we can cause someone by dismissing the way they identify with the world around them.
Yeah. That's what frustrates me sometimes. It's like when people have these arguments and debates about, the pronouns, the preferred pronouns. It's like, how hard is it to just be respectful and, use what they want you to use? It's not that hard. It's called respect.
Right. If they were calling you Tom all of the time and your name wasn't Tom, your feelings might get hurt a little bit.
Yeah.
And then let's add those other intersections on top of that you're dismissing. And I do understand, right? Talking about intersectionality, we also have to look at the intersection of the person who has less intersections, if you will, who has less minoritized experiences. They don't understand.
Yes.
So we can choose not to educate because we do not have the energy for that. But I also, for me, I like to not get angry with them. I like to assume the positive and that their defensiveness and their being such a jerk and mean and nasty is ignorance, which I think it is for most people. There are some people who are just jerks. I
Yeah.
can't do anything about them anyway.
Yeah. Huh. Let's see. Trying to see, where did I leave off? So, I wanted to ask, in your LinkedIn bio, when I was preparing for an interview and stuff, I saw a statement you had on your bio, that you stated, through an intersectional lens, I help individuals navigate the world within their full authenticity, and I support organizations as they create spaces for people as intersectional beings. So I wanted to ask if you could share a bit about how you do this.
I am an intersectional octopus. I have lots of brains and lots of hearts, and I let them work together, and having lots of conversations. That's the number one thing. Conversation. This right here is part of how I do that. I started working one-on-one and in small groups with individuals, based on my experiences from working with teachers and mentoring and supporting in that area, talking about burnout. I brought so much of that over with me, along with the certified sexology, which 95% of the time, not talking about sex. 95% of the time, we're talking about stress, communication, and the sensory nervous system. So people hear, like, I have certified sexologist on my LinkedIn page, and I've had people say, take that off there. That's not relevant. Yes, it is. Because consent and learning about consent, when we say that, people think sex. It means saying yes or saying no. Sex. It's not. It's every single thing that we do in our life. It's consent to be in the environment that we are in. My consent with this computer that is in front of me, and whether I have it on a white screen or in dark mode, makes a difference in how I feel. Consent is a huge thing at work. It's huge in our relationships. So that's what I do, is I say, let's look at these intersections that you have. Let's look at all of these different identities. A lot of times I'm working with nerds like me, and we literally take out a D&D or whatever game they really like, and we make a character of who they are. And then we say, okay, how does this character interact with the world around them? What do they need to be successful? And what things are harming them? Or what's their kryptonite versus what's their magic, And so that's what I do with individuals. Then for organizations, because really I can work with individuals all day long, but if they don't have supports in place, now we're going back to that ACEs thing, right? So they're experiencing trauma, but they have nothing to provide resilience in light of traumas that they may be facing. And in the workplaces, we want work to be a place of resilience. We want it to be a safe place, somewhere for them to come and be productive and feel like they are contributing members of the society. Well, how do we do that? Here's an example. Can you imagine? Just imagine this for a minute. Part of the onboarding process of starting with a new company, or having a new manager come in, or getting to know somebody new who's on the team, is having a sensory inventory. And then being provided with one-on-one support to discuss that sensory inventory, to get to know who you are as a human being, because our nervous system is what responds to the environment. When we're looking at PTSD, when we're looking at relationships, when we're looking at emotions, all of that, we're looking at our nervous system and how it is responding. So we don't want people to be in fight flight mode all of the time. That's not where we are most productive. There, we're trying to survive. What we want is people to be, their parasympathetic nervous system to be engaged. So how do we do that? So as this onboarding process, you're learning that about yourself because your employer has provided this benefit to you. And then with that, they already have, because they've had discussions, they have resources available, or are prepared to make resources available to support your work environment.
That's interesting. Can you, not to get into too many details for all of this, but can you share maybe a couple of what types of questions or things would be on the inventory, and like what sort of resources would be there to help with those things?
Sure. So something, for example, that might happen is I might ask a question of what kind of sounds. I think actually you provided a sensory checklist, which is a little mini one. It's just a little mini one, but that will give people a little idea of what it would, of how it would start. But what kinds of sounds do you like? When you listen to music, do you like high pitched voices? Do you like low pitched voices? That's going to make a difference. If we have overhead music happening and this person is really averse to high pitched voices, every time a high pitched voice comes on the overhead, they're going to be like, ugh, and it's going to disrupt them, and they're going to have to regulate. So we're going to ask about sounds. We're going to ask about if you could choose the clothes that you wear to work. Do you like tight clothes? Do you like, I have actually suggested to people that they wear corsets at work. And I've made social media posts talking about how a corset can provide somebody with what they need to be successful in the workplace, because they like that pressure and that helps them feel good. So it's engaging the parasympathetic nervous system as the day goes on.
Okay. That's
cool, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like it would ask about what kind of light do you prefer? I can tell you right now, overhead lights should never, ever, ever be used. There's nobody who likes them. Nobody likes overhead fluorescent lights. They cause every single person on this planet pain. But they're the most common ones in most office settings.
Yeah.
And schools, by the way.
Yeah. Oh.
So those are the kinds of questions that would be on there to help somebody identify what's going to provide them with the most sensory, I call it sensory relevant environment for them.
That's cool. So I know we were talking a bit about your work, but for yourself, can you share like how your own intersectional identities, how that affects your life and your work?
Oh, um, I really had to think about this one. You'd think that would be very easy for me to answer, right? Like it would be super easy, but I really had to think about it because, like I said earlier, I can pass as a straight, cisgender, heterosexual, neurotypical human being. And I did for a long time. I was the soccer mom. Let me tell you, I am no soccer mom. That is so far away from anything that I am. I have tried over and over again to grow my hair out long and to do the girl thing. But what I realized is I can like makeup because I really do like makeup. I don't wear it anymore. It just causes me so many sensory problems that it's not worth it to me. But I love playing with makeup and I'm good at it. That has nothing to do with my gender identity. Nothing. But for a long time, those two things went hand in hand. Those two things were equal. So, you know, being able to pass has made many things in my life easier. But it is traumatic going through your life being somebody who you are not. What would have happened if that 15-year-old girl who said she was going to be a sex therapist became a sex therapist? What would have happened if that human being would have gone to school right out of high school? What if that human being had not had the experiences that they had that caused them to want to run away from school and run away from home and just, I'm going to show you, world, that I am not this weird, crazy person, that I can be successful. And that success is dependent upon me being a heterosexual woman in a relationship with her high school sweetheart. So that is what I did. And it was awful and not successful. And I continued doing that for years, ignoring so many of the intersections that were there. You know, that whole the poem about the roads and the fork in the road and which one are you going to take? It's not that one's not traveled. It's, is it acknowledged? Because it's freaking there.
Mm-hmm.
It's there. There might be weeds over the top of it. I might not be able to see it, and it might be a smaller road. It might be a little dirt road. It might be a little trail and not a highway, but it's there. And it's part of my personal map. And in ignoring it, I'm doing a disservice to myself and a disservice to the world.
Yeah. Wow. That's really good. Good point.
Thanks. I didn't actually have that written on the paper. But the thinking, right? The thinking that I had to do about it. Honestly, that is the one. Like many of these things, I have like a list of things. Oh, I want to hit on this and this and this. All I had written on there was passing has been beneficial.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
But it's not what makes me happy. That person who passes is accepted. But at what cost?
Yeah. I was thinking about what you said about what would have happened if you did what you wanted at 15 and became a sex therapist, and what would have happened if this happened. And looking back, I've thought the same thing. Like after I got diagnosed with ADHD, I looked back and I was like, you know what? If I knew then what I know now, things would have been probably completely different. Um, I might not have uh, made some of the changes that I've made, um, and because a lot of the changes I've done, I didn't even realize it was because I had gotten bored and my brain wanted something new and exciting and something different to do. So,
Right.
well,
Yeah. Would you have addressed that need in a different way?
yeah.
That's always the question.
hmm See one comment here. Steve's here. Hey, Steve. Glad you
Hi,
could
Steve.
be here today and join us. Um, yeah. So let's see. My next question I had was what? So this one goes along with my previous question, um, which is just what are some unique challenges you have faced due to intersectionality, your different intersectional identities, and how have you gotten through those?
Well, when I was younger, this may very well trigger some people. This may very well be a trigger. The person who I am going to talk about is well known to a lot of people and has caused a lot of harm to the community. I am originally from a small town outside of Topeka, Kansas, and the Westboro Baptist Church is in Topeka. Fred Phelps was the head of that church, and I have been personally attacked, which affected my job because there were pictures taken of me with my girlfriend and sent along with my pictures of my tag on my car. They were sent to my employer, which of course I didn't get fired or anything like that, but it caused a fuss. It created conversations that didn't need to be had. And it created a lot of, for me, being somebody, it's like, I can like these people. I can like all of this group of people. If I just choose not to like this, then I don't have to go through this again.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me, it just made me feel disconnected from a community, and it made me not move forward with the trajectory that I was on within that community. So after leaving school, graduating and all of that, choosing not to go to college, immediately buying a house, going down that whole road. Here I am, 18 years old, bought a house. We're living together, everything. We're doing the life that we're supposed to do, picket fence, all that good stuff. When that relationship ended, I was free. So what? The first person who I had ever fallen in love with was a girl, and she did not reciprocate that. She was not a lesbian, and she was not interested in girls in any fashion. Okay. But I have all of these human beings in front of me. That's a lot of fish in the sea. That's a lot of relationships. That's a lot of really beautiful things that can happen. And that's the trajectory that I was on. And that took me right back to, is it worth spending the energy for this? Or can I just settle? So I did. And it's okay. You are a woman and you're going to be with a man and you're going to do the things that you're supposed to do because that's what success means. And in my family, that was definitely, my family is not particularly, have never been particularly loving about me being queer. That's never been something that was, never particularly a nice part of our relationship. So it was all of these people. The whole world is saying that who I am is wrong. That's a pretty big message.
Yeah.
Right? That's a pretty big message. And having ADHD, I sex, drugs, and rock and roll, baby. How am I going to live with this? I went to work every day. I did the things that I needed to do, and I had lots of sex, and I had sex with girls, but it was secret, and it was never going to be a relationship. And I put a huge wall up. And then I had sex with guys, and it was like, I need you to love me. Let me do whatever I can because that's what it means to be a good woman, is to be loved by a man. And that's what I need to be happy and healthy. And I'm going to drink alcohol and I'm going to, do drugs. I'm going to do whatever. I'm going to take speed every night to help me sleep because I can't sleep otherwise. And, just that's huge, right? And those two things combined, the ADHD and the queer identity and the growing up in a way that's not supportive of personal identity, in a very white Christian setting, those three things collided and did not create the most wonderful space for me. Eventually that led into, it led into not having great relationships. It led into getting married, getting pregnant, getting divorced while I was pregnant, becoming a single mom. Thankfully, no drugs and alcohol, at that point anymore. It led to turning around, getting married again to a very wonderful person, but not being happy in that marriage and pushing myself down and hating myself so much. I had cervical cancer. And it was really a really odd thing because most cervical cancers are related to HPV. Okay. And when all of my biopsies and all of that came back and there was no HPV, it was like part of the conversations that were happening was, well, this is really weird. I was like, it's not weird. That is anger. That is anger that manifested in my body and the part of me that I was ignoring. And I'm not doing it anymore. And here's who I am. I am gender fluid and I am queer. And and I ended up not married to that person anymore, Yeah. So it has affected every aspect of my life. Every single aspect, as it does to anyone.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. And, that's so tough when you're in an environment where everyone around you is not supportive of who you are. That's really hard to go through. And just thank you for being open and sharing that.
Well, thank you for letting me feel safe to do so.
Steve says, I'm sorry to hear that, Angela. That's a horrible thing to have to go through.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah. Thank you for hearing my story.
And I see he did ask a question before this. If you want to touch on it a little bit, is for a company that is trying to diversify the workforce, how do you avoid cheesy or cringy advertising and still target diversity?
No, no stories about us without us. Get actual diverse audiences in there to do that. And if they are not already on staff,
Mm-hmm.
make it happen.
Yeah.
Make it happen. And it's about being honest. And what I see so many companies doing is creating this, it's performance.
Mm-hmm.
It can't be a performance. It has to be true and genuine. And if it's not true and genuine and it's not well thought out, and if you cannot feel it in your body that that's the right thing to do, then you need to question if you are the person who should be making those decisions. Because you can't half-ass it. Unfortunately, it does get half-assed a lot. And you
Mm-hmm.
have to be humble, and you have to have so much humility to say, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I see some of these advertisements and see people from the community going, who let them do this? They did not have a black person or someone telling them this is not a good look.
Right. They just looked at all of the stereotypes and addressed the stereotypes and went from there.
Mm-hmm.
While those stereotypes are there for a reason, somebody has said something because of one interaction that they have had with a person with a certain label. And then it has taken off and carried out into the community. That's how Rain Man happened. That's great. That is somebody's experience. But that's not the only experience. And it's important to not, you just can't do the surface level BS. You can't.
Yeah. And Steve says that makes sense. Thanks. So, um, so let's see. So my next question, I love this whole conversation that we're having, um, and especially on your work and what you do and everything. And I wanted to ask what makes you so passionate about this topic and so passionate about this type of work.
Um, I think I'm passionate about it because I was passionate about the kids I was working with, and then recognized that the teachers, right, like there's this hierarchy that we have, and we're all interlocking, and we have to work together. And we live in a culture, for those who are listening who are in, westernized culture, we live in this culture that is like, you have to do it alone.
Hmm.
And that's not true. What's true is you can't do it alone.
Yeah.
You can for a while, but that's not sustainable. Amelia Nagoski, she is co-author of the book Burnout that talks about the stress response cycle. And I love her so much. She is also an autistic woman. She has this quote. It says, "What you need is a bubble of love around you, people who care about your well-being as much as you care about theirs." That is what we have to survive. Yes, we need food. Yes, we need water. But what would be more important to you? A gym membership or to have your boss provide you with the opportunity to take a sensory inventory and have a one-on-one conversation about something that affects every moment of your life, even when you're sleeping? Which one makes you feel more cared about?
The second.
Right? I mean, it's not just the act of here's this service I'm providing. It's I care about your overall well-being, not just the 8 hours that you're in the office or however long you're here or your remote work, not just about the money that you're making for me, but as a human being, because your existence makes my life better. That's where my passion comes from. I want to contribute to my society. Contribution is one of those parts of self-actualization.
Mm-hmm.
And I want, so contribution is, I just want to take a step back for a second and let's look at what contribution is, because people look at the term productivity and they're like, ew, that's so capitalistic. We work, we make money, we want to be productive. This is what human beings do. It's really the need to share and to be part of your community, right? So we want to contribute, which means I feel significant outside of me.
Yeah.
It means that I am connected to this society somehow. It is consensually giving within my ability in a way that does not take away from my own health, safety, or welfare. It is giving that supports my personal desires.
Mm-hmm.
And it is giving without expecting something in return, respecting my boundaries as well as other people's. I am passionate about that because I need to contribute in order to feel connected with the world around me. And I want to be loved and cared for.
Yeah. How? The I'm losing my train of thought here. Um, so when we talk about the sensory work that you do, I wanted to ask, because when I was looking at your blog, your one blog post, that was the first time I'd ever came across something that talked about the eight senses. I'm like, people always mention the sixth sense, and you're talking about eight, and I'm like, there's eight, there's three more. What are they? So I wanted to ask if you can share um, what are those eight senses that you talk about and work with, and what have you learned about the last three?
Okay. Oh, this just gets me. Um, okay. So we have the five that everybody knows that you're taught in school all the way, from the time that you're born. It's you have five senses and okay, great. Not everybody actually has all of those five. Right? Let's be honest. Not everybody is able to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody is able to see. Not everybody is able to taste, smell. But those five senses that we all learn about, I don't need to go into those, I don't believe. The other three. So we have vestibular, and I will explain these, but I want to list them out first. We have vestibular, we have proprioception, and we have interoception. Vestibular. That is that sense of movement, that sense of balance. Okay, so when there are some people who the act of going from an upright position to a sitting position can be very frightening. And that sounds weird, right? Like that sounds really weird to so many people. Like, how can sitting down scare you?
Yeah.
Well, if you are disconnected from that sense, or that sense is disrupted, if you've ever had like an ear infection or water in your ear that makes you dizzy, that's frightening. Imagine going through your life like that every day, all the time. Right? So this is that sense of being grounded. I am here. I am safe right here where I am standing. But not everybody has that. Not everybody feels that way. And that then results in having an upset stomach and having a loss of balance and not feeling safe in your surroundings. It can be very disorienting. And, you're clumsy, and maybe because you're dizzy a lot, you're not able to write, and you're not able to function reading the screen. It can really have interact with your other 5 senses that most people are aware of. So it can cause vision issues. So imagine you go to the eye doctor and they are not aware of this vestibular thing. They are not aware that you are autistic or dyslexic or whatever, and you're getting glasses. But we're not looking at what happens when we're dysregulated from a sensory perspective. So I'm going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I keep going and telling my doctor, these glasses aren't right. These glasses aren't right. Well, there's something else going on. And the doctor's like, we tested them. They're right. But today, my prescription looks different than it did yesterday. All because of how I'm experiencing the world right now. Right? Fascinating, right? And that's just like a baby explanation of it. But so you can imagine how, let's just talk about sexuality for a minute. You're great and you're happy and you're being sexual with your partner, and then you move to lay down. And suddenly you don't know why, but suddenly you're scared, you don't feel right, and you vomit. What if that happens every time you have sex?
Well, yeah.
Or vice versa. Vice versa. You feel very comfortable sitting, or you're used to sitting. You're not used to being in a standing position. That transition affects it's your vestibular sensory system that is affected in that transition, that can be very scary and frightening for somebody who's disabled, and that's not a normal position, and they have to learn how to do that as they are working with a physical therapist or getting a new device, or the many things that can happen. That's important for the physical therapist to be aware of, and the occupational therapist.
Yeah. I never really thought about that, but that kind of makes sense. Now I'm just thinking about an experience I had as a kid. So, because of my disability, I've always used a wheelchair my entire life. But I remember in elementary school, I went to a school, a specialized school for kids with disabilities, and the physical therapists that I had there, they have all types of different equipment and stuff that they use with kids for physical therapy, occupational therapy, to help with their disability. I remember when I was at that school, that was actually the first and only time I've ever ridden on a bike, because they had a special bike that that had like a short back, and it had a seatbelt to tie around you to hold you on the seat, and they had straps for your feet to tie your feet to the pedals, and I would be on there and I could pedal and ride, but it was always such a weird feeling
Mm-hmm.
out of my chair and onto the bike. So when you talked about that, that's kind of what I started to think about. I was like, huh, that is a weird feeling.
It is a weird feeling, and it can be very scary. And for sensory seekers, it can be wonderful. Like, woo, this is wonderful for me. I love it. I could do it all day long. I could sit here and spin in my chair. And when I'm feeling stressed, I can spin in my chair. And you've probably seen me do this a couple of times. I enjoy that kind of motion. And that's my vestibular sensory system interacting with my environment.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, because I think when they would get me onto the bike, once I was strapped in, I felt okay and I felt comfortable and safe. But until all those straps were on, I did feel scared and not safe because I'm like, I'm going to tip over and fall at any moment here.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. And then we attribute that fear to, oh, you don't trust me. You need to trust me. I got you. I got you. You're fine. This has nothing to do with me trusting you. I trust you, but there's something going on in my body right now that does not feel good. And that is putting me in that fight flight mode. So, yeah.
um,
So that was just one of them. So the other two are just as exciting. Proprioception, that is, so the vestibular system, right, it communicates movement. Proprioception is like, where am I in my space, right? So imagine you're cooking and you know that you need to put the pan on the fire, but for some reason it's not setting there, and you take the pan and it drops on the floor because you didn't have the correct sense of space where that was. Again, kind of that, what's my body doing, where I'm gonna take a step forward, or I'm going to move my arm forward. That's proprioception. What is our body actually doing in the space that it's in? And again, we have to use the other senses to work with that. Like, I have to use my eyes or my touch in order to, maybe you've seen somebody who every single time before they put something down, they touch the space that they're putting down the cup first. That's because they're not certain that that's actually where it's going to land, so they're touching it.
Oh.
Right? Touching, maybe touching the wall as you're going along the wall helps you know where you are in relation to that. And it's very, going to physical therapy, knowing that I need to engage my glute muscle and my butt in order to support this exercise that I'm doing for my core activity because I have back pain. A physical therapist has to take somebody through that process. And if you're somebody who is not in sync with that particular sense, that sensory system, they can tell you that all day long, but you can't feel it. So they're going to have to do something to help your brain connect with the physical body to know what's happening. A lot of the sensate focus and the sensory work that we do with clients, if we are working on helping somebody be able to achieve orgasm, I hate that word, achieve orgasm, but people understand what it means in this context. So they can actually have that orgasm and experience that orgasm. We may have to actually help them literally connect their brain to that feeling. And they might have to actually, every time before they have sex, whether it's with somebody else, multiple other people, or with themselves, think about the process of how that's going to work in order to be able to make that happen. So that's proprioception.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
how come we don't know about these things? And then there's interoception. And that's our feelings. That's our temperature regulation. It's being hungry, it's being thirsty, knowing that you have to go to the bathroom, and knowing how you are feeling emotionally. So it's what's happening inside of you. Sensual, sexy feelings, right? Your heart rate is increasing. And what does that mean? In this situation, does that mean that you are in trouble and that something bad is getting ready to happen and that you should have a reaction of, I need to get out of here? Or does that heart racing mean I'm excited and I'm enjoying this and I want more of it? You know, it could be laughing. Maybe I panic every time I laugh because when I laugh, I get my heart rate up and it scares me. So I just don't laugh because it scares me every time. Laughing is not pleasurable. Yeah.
Wow. There's so much to this that you can learn.
So much. So much.
So kind of going off of this, can you share like how you use the eight senses in your work, particularly how, like, what makes it so important for neurodivergent folks?
Our nervous system is directly related with how we think about, feel about, and do life. And our nervous system is basically regulated. It takes in the information through those eight senses, and then it processes that information, and then it responds or reacts. What we want is for it to respond, because reaction is something that happens in a different part of our brain. So let's just say back brain versus front brain. Okay. Back brain, which is more of a primitive brain. And I'm really super simplifying this. For anybody who's watching and wants to say you didn't explain it on, I know. The brain, there are different parts of the brain. There's different jobs that happen in the brain. Right. So our reactions happen instinctually. Something happens, we react to it. But up here, we have different processes where we recognize that what happened either is or is not harmful to us, and we respond accordingly. Snake on the floor. Ah, scary. That's a reaction. Mm-hmm. Snake on the floor. Oh, it's just a rubber toy snake. Cool. Pick it up. Go about your business. That's the difference between a reaction and a response. In understanding our eight senses and how we each individually process the input that comes in, we are more able to respond rather than being reactive all of the time. As someone with ADHD, you understand, I am sure, how easy it is to react and then be told that you are overreacting. There's no such thing. You're not overreacting. You're just reacting in however your body tells you to react.
Yeah.
Because something happened, it made you feel unsafe, and then you reacted in a way that was unexpected by somebody else and they didn't like it. Versus responding. Something happened, you are aware that your body, this sense that you have in your body with your heart racing and whatever, could be because you're in trouble, or it could be something else. And you're able to think about that and process it and then respond the way that you want to, consensually, within your own choice.
Mm-hmm.
We can do that with every single thing. And I keep using the word resilient, and I want to make sure that anybody who's watching this, resiliency is thrown around out there. You know, grit and resilience, grit and resilience. I don't like these terms very much in the way that they are used and thrown around today. But resilience is really a thing, and it happens when you have the proper resources in place, which many people do not. If you are in a minoritized group, you do not have the resources in place to be resilient in the first place. And it's not your freaking fault. And that's the problem with the word, is that people say, you need to be more resilient. Well, I wish I could be, but there aren't things in place to help me with that. So the world needs to help put some supports in place so that I can be resilient. So that's what I mean when I say resilient.
Yeah. I think part of that is like what you touched on earlier with how in Western society we're so individualistic, and so I think a lot of times when people say you need to be more resilient, it's coming from a view of, you know, you, something in you that you have to do to be stronger or resilient or whatever, and not taking into account the environment around you and what supports you have or don't have.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Going back to what, and I agree with what Steve just said there.
Resilience comes in numbers, having a good foundation and community that supports you. Yeah.
It's all about that. Emily and Amelia Nagoski, in their book Burnout, say self-care is not the answer. Care is the answer. That sounds so simple, but it's so true. It is so, so, so true. So the work that I do, and the reason why it's important, and how I use that in my work, is to create those supports based on the individual's need, and then help them advocate for that.
That that is so important, and something I think needs needs to be done in more places. But I feel like no one really knows about it and or thinks about it to be able to put this in place, right? And even because I'm thinking about when I worked as a counselor, I used to be uh, uh, in the mental health field, and I did substance abuse counseling. Um, but you know, I didn't learn about the other three senses in school. I didn't learn about it in my internship or working with others. So I think this is just something that not many people know about, that needs to be brought up more.
It does, and not pathologized, right?
Yeah.
Not pathologized.
Yeah.
It's amazing what happens when we take pathology out of the mix, and we just say, this is what it means to be human.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What are we going to do with it?
Yeah. Well, I just have a couple more questions before we wrap up. And for anyone watching, if you have any questions, we'll do a quick Q&A a session right after these. So drop your questions into the comment box. and we'll get to them right after. So I have like three more questions. The first one being, what are some stereotypes? So I kind of always end with a version of these three questions. But what are some stereotypes about being neurodivergent or queer that you think writers should be careful of?
There are so many. So first, let's start with this. When you've met one, you've met one. All human beings have things that are similar, but we are all individual and different. Every single one of us. So just like you would not want to have this person's experience over here with this woman, and let's say you're a woman, and they have a bad experience with this woman, therefore all women are whatever she did to them. And because you're a woman, that means that you're that too, even though that's something you would never, ever, ever do, and it doesn't even make any sense and you don't understand it. That was a very neurotypical example of something that might happen, right? We hear that, right, all the time. Not all men.
Yeah.
Not all white women.
Yeah.
Same goes for us. The same goes for us. So let's look. Autism and ADHD is something for little white boys.
Mm-hmm.
Not true. The behavior that often happens that is the exact same in people who are not little white boys is often labeled as bad or ill-bred or unintelligent or having no manners instead of getting a diagnosis. So autism and ADHD and dyslexia and Tourette's and all of these other things are not just something that little white boys have. Everybody can and should have access to the same resources. That neurodivergence means that you're not smart or capable of success. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard, but you're so successful. You have a master's degree. You're so well spoken. Okay, and what do those two things have to do with it?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the other one. We're not all savants. I do not have some special off the charts, ridiculous level of genius because of neurodivergence. So those two very contrasting myths are out there, and neither of them are true across the board.
Right.
That we can't make eye contact. I most definitely can make eye contact.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times I don't. I like to look at people's lips. I can identify most people by their nose. I like to watch people's lips. It helps me understand what people are saying. And if I don't feel comfortable and safe with you, I will not look you in the eye. And that does not mean that I am a liar or somebody to not be trusted. It also doesn't mean that I'm incapable of looking you in the eye. It might be very uncomfortable for me, and I may choose not to do it, but I am capable of it. And some people say, well, you can look people in the eye, therefore you can't be autistic. Not true.
Right. Right.
As a person who grew up as a girl, it was ingrained in me to be polite. And being polite means that you look people in the eye.
Mm-hmm.
This is still being told today to students, ESL students in schools who come from cultures where it is disrespectful to look at people in the eye, are still being instructed to look people in the eye when you talk. Yeah. Why? So there's all of that. Everyone is a little autistic. No, they're not. No, don't ever say that. If you're going to write about that in your book, have it be something that is addressed as not true. Because it is something that is said a lot, and it is just not true.
Along those lines, I would add, the whole everyone's a little ADHD, or we all have
Mhm.
trouble focusing, or you know
Yeah.
those.
Yeah, we all have trouble focusing. You have
We all,
no idea.
yeah.
You have no idea. Yeah, yeah. The puzzle symbol.
What's the puzzle symbol?
So, that is something that is wonderful and beautiful and makes us feel good and happy and part of a community. Many of us do not do that because it signifies that there's something wrong, that there's a part of the puzzle that's missing within us and who we are as human beings.
Hmm.
So many of us do not appreciate the puzzle symbol for that reason. We are not faulty, we are not damaged, and there is nothing missing.
Where where is the puzzle symbol usually shown? Because I don't think I've heard about the puzzle symbol.
I think it originated. I think it originated with Autism Speaks.
Okay.
I think that was the original. Like there would be a ribbon, and inside the ribbon it would be a whole bunch of puzzle pieces,
Oh, okay.
and it was like, I'm an ally. And I guarantee if somebody went back and looked on my Facebook page, they would find me wearing a headband supporting autism with that on there. That ribbon that's filled with puzzle pieces.
Mm.
And it really does. It's something that I hadn't specifically thought about. I hadn't connected those two things, but absolutely 100%. I get it. It makes sense. And as soon as I saw that and heard the conversation, I was like, just because I'm not sensitive to it doesn't mean it doesn't make sense. And that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
High and low functioning. This is still something that a lot of people say, you're high functioning, you're low functioning. I get it all the time. You're so high functioning, you're so high functioning. In need of support, in need of a lot of support, and it really depends on what's happening. Mm-hmm. It is contextual, not an overarching process. Because where somebody might need a lot of support in one area, another person may need no support in that area, but need a lot of support in another area. And both could look like they're not functioning as society wants them to function, but they actually have areas that are way higher functioning than this person over here and that person. And so that high function versus low function, those are just, they're harmful terms. You know, it's almost like you're worth it and you're not worth it. Like it is not an overarching, encompassing, or very aware way of addressing somebody. Not to mention, you don't know what somebody looks like outside of the environment that you're seeing them in.
Yeah.
They could be freaking out. They could be in complete meltdown right now in front of you, and you might not know. So let's not use those terms. Rain Man, Sheldon, trains, planes, math, myths. All myths, because there are also people who are really good with words and they love to tell stories, and there's so many individual, unique things that people like. So all of those things are myths. Are not sexual. Autistic people are not sexual. Disabled people are not sexual. ADHD people are over sexual. There are all of these things. This is not true. If you have heard it, it's not true.
I've heard it, and I think So where do I fall on? Because I'm ADHD and I'm disabled. So
Exactly. So which one is it? It's
yeah,
no. First of all, it's nobody's business.
right.
But secondly, to just look at somebody and to make that assumption is absolutely insane. And unfortunately, in media, in books, and all of that, we see this trope, right? There is a trope that we see over and over and over again. Disabled people are not sexual people.
Mm-hmm.
What? That not true. It's just not true. And if it is true, it's a choice. I mean, I'm struggling with my words here because human beings are sexual beings. We're mammals.
But not,
Whether we have sex or not, we're sexual.
but not everyone, right? Because there are asexual.
Right, but they're still
Right.
sexual. They do not choose to have sexual intercourse,
Right. Okay.
but they may very well still have sexual feelings, have desires, have all of that. It's you. Human beings are sexual beings. It's just part of who we are. It's how we interact with the world around us, and not wanting to have sex, not experiencing desire in the way that other people do, not wanting to have romantic relationships. That's normal. It's a normal sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
So.
Like asexual is still a sexuality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because our sexuality doesn't mean how we have sex.
Right. It's not determined by, whether or not you express it or how you express it.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Asexual is not a lack of sexuality. There we go. I like that explanation better. It's not a lack of sexuality.
That's to phrase it.
So those are all the neurodivergent ones, and there are so many more. But those are just some. Queer myths. Your sexual experience equals your sexual orientation. So you've never had sex with a boy, therefore you are not gay. Not true. Not true. Your sexual experience does not equal your sexual orientation. Homosexuality or gender nonconformity is a mental illness.
Right.
No, it isn't. And that's actually been taken out of the books, so people need to really let that one go.
Yeah.
Right. Queerness or any of the other labels is a lifestyle.
Yeah.
So there's this gray, you can't cure queerness. Okay. If someone's queer, it's not something that can be cured. You can't shock them out of them or send them off to camp or any of those things.
Yeah.
So the other day I'm having a conversation and I'm talking about, I am not getting hired by these people because I'm queer. I said that. And then the person responded back, it's not because you're queer. It's because you look queer.
Mm-hmm.
There's a myth, right? I mean, for me, it happens to be that way. But just because somebody has the side of their head shaved doesn't mean that they are whatever label you want to stick on that.
Right.
Your appearance does not equal your sexuality or orientation or any of those things. And here's one that's going to maybe get people going. Brandon Ambrosino wrote an essay a while back called "I Was Gay, but I Wasn't Born This Way." Okay. And this, I'm going to read just a little tiny bit of what they said. When I first said I chose to be gay, a queer American journalist challenged me to name the time and date of my choice. But this is an absurd way to look at desire. You might as well ask someone to name the exact moment they began liking Hemingway or disliking Chaucer. When did I begin to prefer lilies to roses? What time did the clock read at the exact moment I fell in love with my partner? All of our desires are continually being shaped throughout our lives in the very specific contexts in which we discover and rehearse them. Such a beautiful take on intersectionality right there, right? Like, sex and desire is context driven. So the born this way narrative is harmful to people in that it says you have to have something biologically telling you that you're this way. You don't have the agency to choose how you express yourself as a sexual being.
Mm-hmm.
And I love Lady Gaga and I love the song Born This Way, and I will dance to that all day long and sing and have fun.
Yeah.
But to say you're born that way is non-consensual and taking away agency.
That's really interesting, that, and I've never thought about it that way, because you know, I've heard the born this way, and that's, I always thought that was like kind of in response to those that say this is a lifestyle choice.
Yep.
If, because it's like, well, either, and it's like it puts it as if those are the only two options: either you're born this way, or this is a lifestyle choice, which means you can choose to be different.
Right. Exactly. It's a binary again, because linear thinking says we like binary, but not all of us are linear thinkers, and that's not how we work.
Yeah.
So, right? Very interesting. Okay, that's it. That's all I have for that one. I could go on and on and on, but if you've heard it, it's a myth. It's not true.
Right.
It's one person's experience.
So the next one, kind of going off of that, is what advice would you give to someone writing a neurodivergent or queer character?
Okay. Be an intersectional thinker and have humility. And here's what that looks like. I'm going to lay that out for you and what this looks like. This is actually something I wrote for my Discord community. It's like, if you're going to be in this community, these are some of the values that we have, and this is what it looks like to be an intersectional thinker and have humility, which you need to be in this space. An intersectional thinker and a person with humility values support from other people. So ask for help. Believe that you can make a difference by speaking out. Do not let the idea of, if I talk about this in this way in this piece of writing, I'm going to lose readers. Instead, think, I'm going to make a positive difference in this world by speaking the truth. Respect individual life experiences. Be willing to be confronted about your own behavior and attitudes. And your goal is to amplify the message of marginalized voices without expecting credit or reward. If you do that, in everything that you do, if you go through the process of thinking intersectionally and having humility, doing those things, you will have something that is contributing to the greater good, if you will. And if it's published and something comes back and 5 years down the road, somebody's like, and this and that and research that. Okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Things change. We learn more as we go.
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay, so my last question here was just, are there any other books or resources that you know of that can help writers who are trying to portray neurodivergent and or queer characters?
So if you go to mamapistachio.com/books, you will see my little bookshop there that has my recommendations. It is there because it's an easy way for me to showcase it. I will be honest with you. You're going to find those cheaper elsewhere. However, if you choose to go through that, go in and set up a local bookstore, because they will give some of the proceeds of that to your local bookstore.
Okay.
So I want to say that. Yes, for people who want to go to Amazon or thrift books, you're going to go in and you're going to find these books cheaper on there, and that's perfectly fine. But if you choose to buy it from my bookshop, set up an account so it'll give to your local bookstore, somebody local who you care about and want to give to. So all of them are on there. One that's not on there is at this website, thegenderbook.com. Great book. Thegenderbook.com. Great book talking about gender. Illustrated, it's fun. So that's a cool book. I talked about Emily and Amelia Nagoski. Their books is called Burnout. That one's on my book list. And also Come As You Are is a book specifically about sexuality, and it's really good. It doesn't matter your gender. It was written for women, and it talks about women throughout the book, but it is a great book for any gender. But it's addressing a lot of issues that are traditionally women. And there's a workbook that goes with it. Queerly Autistic, the ultimate guide for LGBTQIA plus teens on the spectrum.
Oh.
That's on the list too. And then here's this resource that they've recently updated. And I highly recommend, if you are thinking about any kind of disability, to go to this website and look at the Accommodation and Compliance Series by Disability on Jan's website, askjan.org. And it's in the publications. They've just updated them. And there are tons of individual publications per disability that are effective accommodations and comply with Title I of the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's a great resource.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's great. Those are pretty much all the questions I have. I know it was a lot, but this was so great to get into and hear you talk about all these topics. And I definitely learned a lot from this discussion, so I hope others have as well. I don't see any questions in the chat box, so we can kind of go ahead and wrap this up now. So Angela, thank you again for being here tonight. And did you have any final thoughts or words you wanted to share?
I just think it is so important. The conversations that you were having and doing what you were doing, and we need to be having these conversations. Mm-hmm. And for you to have a service that is bringing awareness to that, as well as providing the practical application of it, is is very, very, very important. And I hope that you will reach out to me anytime to support you in any way.
Yeah, thank you. This was awesome. So, thank you for being here. And for anyone watching the replay, um, all of the uh, links for Angela's website, her book list, social media pages, they're all linked in the description down below. So definitely go give those a check out. Um, and if you want to see any more interviews, writing diversity interviews that I've done in the past, I have a playlist link down below as well. Um, so go ahead and check that out. Make sure you follow Angela. And also, if anyone wants to learn more about writing diverse characters, I do have an online course that you can take, and also ebook on how to write disabled characters. So all of that is linked down below for you guys to check out. And that is it for tonight. So um, I will see everyone back here again next month with another interview. So bye.